Hi everyone, I apologize about this afternoon. I have been fighting some kind of virus or cold or I don't know, and between the weather and everything else, I crashed. Anyway, so I thought what I would do is do a video about the different forms of essays that we're going to kind of finish out with before vacation. So at least it's up here. I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to actually be looking at my notes, which are on the other side of the screen. So let's talk about expository writing, which really is the term for pretty much all of the essays we are going to look at or we have written. So expository writing really looks at explaining, describing, informing, delivery of how to do something. It really is organized around one topic, and then you develop it based upon a certain pattern, or organization that you will use. You should never assume that the reader of your expository essay has any knowledge about what you're writing. In fact, you should just assume the exact opposite. You should always remember that you're going to be as clear as possible and as specific as possible. I know I've said this all, constantly, but it's good to remember. So I will also put up the document that I'm using for notes on Moodle and probably send it to you. So let's start with the idea that, I'm going to ask you to write an expository essay. Well, really, it's an essay demonstrating to me your knowledge on a given topic. And in this particular case, it's stereotypes. It's a stereotype that people give to people who have tattoos, and why that's the case. And I think, although it seems kind of silly to stereotype someone with tattoos, especially since I'm tattooed, it happens all the time, and there's this strange assumption that, like, we're all bikers or whatever. Every tattoo that I have has meaning to me, so I think that's true with most people who are tattooed, but a strange stereotype arises from that, and we can take that and make an analogy to what we're seeing in the book with Rob and with the people around him, especially when he's at Yale. So you're conveying your knowledge about a specific topic, and you're going to start just like every other essay with your introduction, with your three bodies where you're really looking at the topics or the arguments, and with your conclusion. There are a couple of ways of doing this that you can really kind of work off of. The first is that you can really look at starting with the least important argument and moving to the most important argument, or you can start with the most important argument and ending with the least important. It really depends upon what you're explaining, because sometimes you want to lead with the most important to grasp the reader and end with the least important because the assumption is it's kind of like an afterthought. Or you want to lead with the least important and end with the most important, so you kind of leave the reader walking away with a takeaway. Now, there are a couple of essays that fall into this, and, we may or may not get to them this semester. That's okay. The really important essay is your final argumentative research paper, because really all of these are argument essays. The compare and contrast essay is one that probably you've done over and over again, and you probably just haven't realized it. Comparison is really where you look at the similarities between two things. So if I asked you to look at the similarities between living in West Orange and living in Newark, I think you probably could find some because of the fact that Rob sort of has his foot in both areas. Contrast is where you actually talk about the differences between two things. It's usually two things, not three, but it can be three. Contrast is a much harder essay to write because of the fact that you really have to break apart the topic and each topic and then kind of look at, well, okay, what are the distinct differences? A perfect contrast essay would be if you wrote about Rob and then you wrote about Jeff Hobbs. Very, very different upbringings, very different support system. So that's a perfect type of contrast essay. The next essay, and it's one we're going to look at, is cause and effect. Now, everything has a cause and everything has an effect or a consequence. So you really have to determine kind of which way you're going to approach something. So a cause essay usually outlines why something happened, whereas an effect essay usually discusses what happens after a circumstance. So you can start with cause as your large topic, and then you can break it down into three effects. So great example would be global warming as the cause, and the effect, or why global warming is here, could be, you know, gas emissions, poor carbon footprint, overuse of plastic. That would definitely lead us back to global warming. The other way to do it is to start with poor carbon footprint as an effect, and then to look at potential causes of that footprint. It's kind of the same thing. It just depends upon, you know, how you're approaching the subject matter, okay? The problem solution essay, is another one that, you know, we start with a problem, and that's kind of what your final paper is going to be. And then you end up working towards some kind of solution. So if I said to you, okay, you know, Los Angeles doesn't have a very good transportation infrastructure, there's the problem. How do you see, you know, what do you see as potential solutions? And you could really then outline three potential solutions as, you know, your argument. It really is a question and answer type of essay, because you're starting with a question and then you're really attempting to answer it. It's really important with cause and effect to really be able to look at a cause or an outcome and then be able to break it in its finite pieces. In a sense, it's a classification and division essay, but not really. We'll talk more about classification and division, but just kind of keep in mind all of this for today, and hopefully we will all see each other next week. You should finish up through reading about the tattoos, so that's the stereotype module. A lot of confusion about the stereotype project. You can actually do it in class next week, so don't rush to do it. The idea is that you're going to interview each other about stereotypes. If you feel really shy and you don't want to do it in class, let me know, and then you can interview someone, you know, who's personally in your life and maybe has a response about it. Okay, so I will see you next week.